That brings us to the role of a permaculture designer. You're here. I'm here to teach you to be a designer, but what might you want to do? Well, firstly, I would like you to observe nature. Understand and interpret existing patterns affecting a site. It's not a permaculture designer's role to go to a site, right, and impart our desires on the site. It's for us to interpret the site's needs. Jeff Lawton calls it reading the landscape. We're going to go and do site analysis. We need to understand what is there and how we can interact with nature, or how we can provide for what nature needs, or if there's a problem affecting the site like erosion, how I could change that. But not just go and say, let's level this and build a big high-rise because that's going to look great because I drew it on a plan with no relationship to the actual property. Okay? Then we can interact. So once we observe our site, we see what's going on, we see what its needs are, right, in relationship to possibly our clients or our desires. Then we interact. Apply the patterning of elements for the maximum efficiency so that we can get the maximum yield from the site with the minimum amount of work. Okay, this is going to be a good or functional design. So from the designer's manual, for the final act of a designer, once components have been assembled, is to make a sensible pattern assembly of the whole. That's your drawing. Appropriate patterning in the design process can assist the achievement of sustainable yield. It is the patterning that permits our elements to flow and function in beneficial relationships. The pattern is design, and design is the subject of permaculture. Okay? Let's be clear. Permaculture, a designer's manual. Okay? He's utilizing natural patterns to create a design to facilitate sustainable yield. This is permaculture. Okay? And that will create harmonious interactions between plants and animals, us being in the animal group. So to do that, we need to consider the natural limits and the multiple functional benefits of imposing patterns on the land. Really don't try to force patterns onto the land. We need to interpret the land's needs, and we make patterns that work with the land, not against the land. Maximize the efficiency of what patterns already exist. So that means you need to learn to observe the patterns that are taking place and then see how I can more utilize them to my benefit without changing them. This is going to save you time and money. We spend a lot of time and money when we start to change the natural pattern, especially when builders do lots of earthworks in order to change the topography of a property by moving earth around. And at the end, they still have poor drainage or they have poor water catchment with all of the earth moved. So in permaculture, we are going to look more at with our design, zone, and sector planning. The examples are pattern application. Why do we do zones? Why are we going to do sectors? Because we use those to control patterning. Involve a patterning, we look at physical factors affecting our site. What physical things can we see? Like rock outcrops, erosionary gullies, elevation changes. We want to look at elements that may be present on the site when we come, and we may look to what elements we want to put on the site to meet our lifestyle goals. We need to look at the functions and the yields of each element. So when I look at a chicken, I want to look at what a chicken does, its functions and its yields, not only the yields. Okay? So if we do that, we can take actions. We can apply the things and we can create pathways of how to interact between different elements. So if I have a fire pit and I have the swimming pool, why would there be the relationship between those? What might there be as a relationship, right? I could get in a sweat and go jump in a pool and things like this. And that might be in a recreational atmosphere because I could take the fire, right, easily to create a sauna. And then while we're having fire night, you can get in the sauna and you can then easily jump into the pool, right? And what a nice way to have a celebration, if you will. And these are things where we can see the multiple relationships between elements, not just to do with food production. So site analysis, I go to look at a site. The process of understanding and interpreting existing patterns that are affecting a site is site analysis. And we'll look at these all in more detail. But the sun, the wind, the rain and storm events, fire, or even the neighbors, noise. So right now, if I had to listen to the tuk-tuks because it was the people running up and down a road that I was nearby, all the time and it wasn't for me, that would be quite annoying. If I listen to my own tuk-tuk carrying compost, not so annoying. But as I described, it could have had access from another place, right? These are type of things where we start to say, is that something that we want to invite? Is that something that we want to block, right? I could put up a berm with a tree line to block the noise. I could invite it. These are reasonings. So if we look at that, very large, a loud car. So patterning creates edge effects. So once I have patterns, we're going to look at edge and the edge effect. Edge effect is the interference between two ecosystems. So the edge or the interference or enhances things like the light availability. So I can play with how much light a certain plant gets. This tree could create dapple shading for this tree. So this one is more shade tolerant and doesn't like so much sunlight. For instance, in the tropics, very difficult for me to grow lettuces or what people would describe as leafy vegetables because it's so intensely hot. But I might be able to grow them underneath a chili plant. The chili plant has a very dapple shading, and it also would ward off, say, pests that may want to eat that particular plant, especially if I'm trying to be organic. So at this point, I would utilize the relationship between the chili over the lettuce. This is light enhancement. Nutrient availability. I might have a relationship between a legume, say a bean family, growing with like corn or the three sisters, or squash as a ground cover, corn going up the support formed by the corn, and with a bean. So these three have relationships for nutrient cycling. That's going to increase our productivity with that guild or relationship. And that'll also increase the diversity of our site by understanding those. So this is where we would play with edge to create these results. If we utilize edge effects, we can stack in place and in time. So the example of the pond in more detail. The productivity of a pond increases as the shape of the pond is changed to produce more margin or edge. This can increase plant populations and yields by 20 to 50%. Create niches and microclimates, which will create more diversity. It increases the fish stock, which will increase the nutrient cycling if we use it for our garden, for instance. So the stocking rate of 1 kilogram of fish in a naturalized system is typically equal to 15 meters of linear edge. So if I can increase the edge, I increase the stocking density without adding any other food in a naturalized setting. Okay, so these are why people would like to say, wow. And that's why in ecosystems, when we see more edge, there's more going on because there's more nutrient cycling starting at a base level, going up the trophic pyramid, and then you see the apex predators. Okay, the apex predators can't really survive if there's not the base, and the base is typically supported by edge. So flow and edge. Windbreaks can be planted to either deflect the wind, shelter a home, or stock animals like cows in the wild. They could be blocked from cold winds. You could funnel it, so if I'm in a place that I want to have wind power, but there's not enough wind, so my windmill won't work, but I really want wind power. If I put trees into a funnel, I can increase the airflow into the funnel and run the windmill. Utilize it. Think about energy and understand how you have the choice to block it, accept it, diffuse it, sink it, and this is a choice. So design of permaculture, understanding energy capture through systems-based thinking to target the movement of energy to our desired yield. What do I want? So we can look at edges, stacking vertically. Well, trellises could be zigzagged rather than linear. They're going to be stronger and they create more edge, so there's more ability to grow on. So we get increased duration of length, more edge. It saves space, it saves watering, they're more wind resilient, they have better access from each side, and you can fit more plants into a smaller space. So this is where we look at deforming edge, increases productivity. So valuing edge, crops planted in strips and corridors, which is known as alley cropping or strip intercepts or intercropping. Hedgerows of a tree lucina. So if I put a tree, which is a forage crop for herbivores, fodder shrubs and crops and pastures, or pollinator attractors, all of these, like as I described here, the bungalow area, being a socialized area, but wanting to get more than that one function. So I want to have shade to make it a cooler area in our, say, hot season. But I also want those trees to have a function so I can use them as pollination. So I'm going to get those multiple benefits. Guilds. They're made up of close associations of species clustered around a central element that benefit each other. Well, what does that mean? And why is a guild different than companion planting? Companion planting typically means that one thing takes something from the other. For instance, the corn provides the trellis for the bean provides nitrogen for the corn. There's an exchange. Typically a guild, though, is about us. We try to create guilds to lower our interaction, to better aid in management. I don't have to manage the lettuce like with organic or non-organic herbicides or pesticides, because I can utilize the natural pesticide resistance of a chili plant, because nothing likes to go next to the chili plant, but it doesn't hurt my lettuce that's under the chili plant, so the bugs stay away. Or, for instance, I may make a guild where I have a lettuce and I surround it by spring onions. The spring onions grow up, can create dapple shading because they'll get taller than the lettuce, so it only gets full sunlight in the middle of the day, but not in the right? And nothing likes spring onions. So the bugs won't go through the circle of spring onions. And once I have that one pattern, I can repeat the pattern. So I could have patterns within patterns. So that buffers adverse conditions. It may be something like a certain tree doesn't like wind. So I could use this tree to buffer the wind for this tree. So a fruit tree is typically not liking high wind conditions. So I could make a windbreak, facilitating an increased yield for the fruit trees. So companion plantings, well, planting different species together that assist each other to grow. Examples would be legumes providing nitrogen in the soil, flowers attracting bees and predator insects. Wheat that's planted with Leucaena increases the yield, but when planted with brassicas, the yield decreases. So remember, we have to learn about our plants. Certain ones interact better and it would increase the yield, and in another relationship, they'll actually decrease the yield. It'll take away from that particular plant. So some examples of pattern and design. Well, this is called we can see here a banana circle. We can see mandalas, right? We can see herb spirals. We can see keyhole gardens. And we're going to look through all of those different ones. We'll start keeping, which one, how does it work? Why do we use it? How can we utilize that in your design? Why might you want this one over that one? Some are personal choices, aesthetic choices, relationships to your particular site. This may be more appropriate than that, okay? Ergonomic decisions. And all of these things have to be taken into consideration. There's not necessarily a right or wrong answer, or you have to have this or you don't have to have that. If I don't have a herb spiral, I can't be permaculture, right? Well, guys, I don't have a herb spiral. I showed you one. Many people have made one. It's not saying that I haven't made one, that it's not appropriate. I have enough area that I don't necessarily need to work on the vertical aspect of creating the energy to create that. But if I had a very small urban garden and I was limited to my spatial relationships, that would be a very appropriate way to increase your area in a small space by utilizing the vertical aspect of that garden. You see the balance? Spirals in design, not just in the herb spiral, in our home. So that's a roundhouse, and they spiraled the rafters to lock the rafters in place so there's no central pole. Anybody want to know how to do that? Want to know the trick? So here's the trick. You put a pole in the center, a temporary pole. You cut a piece of plywood, the center of whatever the spiral is in the center, right? You put the pole on a brick. Put some braces. Put the first rafter, second rafter, goes all the way around, it locks in place. You knock down the center pole, locked in place. That's it. Now you have a spiral rafter system with no central pole. So very, very simple, but where did that come from? We can see that interlocked system in flowers. So nature is our teacher, and we design from nature. Whether people speculated about the cosmos, looked at hurricane systems, came down to building roller coasters, herb spirals, or spiral staircases, okay? This is what we want to start to appreciate, where these shapes and the forms came from. So we will then transition into our design section, where we start to have a process. So we create the permaculture design process, or say step-by-step design. How do I start here? And how do I move to a finished design that I could, say, present to a client? When we break design or master planning into smaller or individualized pieces, it becomes easier. It's like a portfolio. Each day we just work on one section that all together gets put into the 10 sections. So over 10 days, we have created the 10 sections of our design. It's also, for me, important that I teach you to design. I want you to be a designer. I want you to be able to do it more than once. So it's not very relevant or important about your particular first design. Your design is to learn design. Once you learn design, you can practice design, and you can become better. And you're going to be a designer, hopefully, your whole life. You're taking it on as the owner designer. So you have a living document. Your design is going to be yours, not mine. You're going to keep it, not me. And you're going to own it for the rest of your life. It's not going to be a homework assignment that you're asked to do, and then after the teacher says, I don't want it, and it's not for anything that's relevant to your life, so you throw it away. This hopefully will allow you to work on your goals. They will change over your life. As you develop, mature, form new relationships, your goals will shift and change. But it's going to allow us to build a document that's like our personal thing. We can keep it. We can work on it. We can improve it. We can interrelate it to our lives and how we deal with them on a daily basis. So it's an organic or a living document. So in that instance, it's not very necessarily daunting of a exercise, because when you break it into the smaller sections, each one is very logical and very step by step. It's only because we weren't shown it when we were younger. If we would teach 5-year-olds this process, right? By the time they were 7, they could make world-class master plan designs, I'm telling you, in permaculture, because it's nature. It's just that we weren't shown it. So it's not complicated, and that's what we're going to move into tomorrow, breaking the process into manageable, step-by-step chunks so that everybody comes out with a really nice plan that suits their personal lifestyle choices. So no design is ever the same.